Hello viewers, and welcome to our series entitled When Church Hurts. I'm Pastor Colin, and this series is going to help and encourage people that have been misused, abused, ill-treated, belittled, rejected or hurt in various ways within a church context. For those who have become disillusioned with some of the shenanigans going on in churches today and are absolutely fed up of it. Having said that, let's jump straight into today's episode. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of When Church Hurts. Now in today's episode, we're going to continue in looking at how to avoid abusive churches and leaders, part 2. Before we go into today's lesson, let's remind ourselves of a definition of spiritual abuse that we've given previously. And that is the mistreatment of a person in the name of God, faith, religion, or church organization at the expense of their spiritual well-being. And just to define that definition even more, you could explain it this way. When any member of clergy or anyone in a leadership role controls, dominates, or manipulates others at the expense of their spiritual well-being. And as we said previously, when we're talking about leadership role, we do include within that Sunday school teachers, house group or cell group leaders, choir directors, department heads, anyone within a capacity of a leader within a church setting or church context. Now, following on from our last episode, let's have a look at some other possible indicators of spiritual abuse. Number 1, positions of authority and power inappropriately given to members as rewards for 100% loyalty to the leadership. Let's have a look at 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 1 to 3, which reads, "The elders who are among you I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock." Now, anyone in a position of authority and power should have the necessary skills, the maturity, and the attitude to properly and appropriately look after God's people. Their position should be in line with God's calling for their lives. They should never ever be put into a position of leadership for the purpose of fulfilling somebody else's own personal agenda. This can result in some very serious problems, as the individual may lack the maturity and be used by the leadership to further control, manipulate, and dominate others as instructed. Number 2, failure of leadership to take action when another leader abuses their position. Let's have a look at 1 Samuel chapter 2 verses 22 to 25. Now Eli was very old, and he heard everything his sons did to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people transgress. If one man sins against another, God will judge him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him?" Nevertheless, they did not heed the voice of their father, because the Lord had desired to kill them. The Bible tells us that God desires to kill them. But if their father, who was their senior leader, had addressed the situation earlier, perhaps this could have been avoided. Now, as I've said before, no leader is perfect, but a leader does have the responsibility of knowing who they have presiding over other people in their ministry and to take the appropriate action where necessary. God in this story was not at all impressed with Eli's lack of action. Let's continue the story in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 11 to 13. Then the Lord said to Samuel, "Behold, I will do something in Israel at which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he did not restrain them." Eli had the responsibility to take appropriate action when he discovered that his sons were wrongdoing, but he absolutely failed to do so. It was his responsibility as a senior leader to take authority and deal with the issues and the problems that were being generated because of his sons' rebellion and disobedience. Number 3, special treatment or misuse of individuals for the benefit of the leader. A person may have many talents. They may be gifted, they may have status in society, they may be a large donator, they may be well educated, or they may have a charismatic personality or a great and wonderful testimony, etc., etc. And because of these things, they are favoured above others. Acts 10:34 tells us, "Then Peter opened his mouth and said, 'In truth I perceive that God shows no partiality.'" Preferential treatment creates divisions and cliques and causes some to feel less than others. Now, there's nothing wrong with having any of the above mentioned giftings or talents, but how we treat others or how others are treated that don't have such qualities is quite telling. A leader has a responsibility for the entire flock or the entire congregation, not just a select few. Let me give you a few examples. A person who is beginning to operate in the gift of prophecy, being exalted and elevated to a status that they are not mature enough to handle, and eventually falling. The emphasis was more on the gifts making the leader's ministry look good as opposed to the development of the individual's character. There is no maturity, and that maturity can lead to a downfall and bring a lot of hurt and pain to other congregants in that organization. Or it may be someone who has what is regarded as an amazing story or a very powerful testimony. Maybe they used to be a prostitute or a drug dealer, and God has miraculously changed their lives. However, they were not properly prepared spiritually or protected or even warned about the spiritual backlash that may come against them. There's more emphasis on their testimony being used as a poster, as you like, to promote the ministry as opposed to promoting God. It was more about the ministry being elevated and being seen as something special. Now, there is a place for people to give their testimonies and share what God has done in their lives. If that's at the expense of their own spiritual well-being, there is a danger. Another example could be that it's always the same old people being asked to lead special projects, lead the prayer, give presentations, sing the lead when there are others equally suited. This can cause others to feel wholly inadequate and overlooked. If a leader's motives are wrong, there may be a disproportionate emphasis placed on the greatness of the organization or the ministry as opposed to the greatness of God, which may lead to A, individuals feeling used and abused at the expense of their spiritual well-being. B, others made to feel less than if they are always overlooked and disregarded. Or C, some becoming puffed up with pride in seeing themselves as better than others. So let's summarize what we've looked at in this short episode pertaining to how to avoid abusive leaders and churches. Well, number one, positions of authority and power inappropriately given to members as rewards for 100% loyalty to the leadership is a very, very big danger sign. Number two, failure of leadership to take appropriate action when another leader abuses their positions, like we explained in the story of Eli and his sons. Eli knew that his sons were abusing congregants. They were sleeping with the women in the congregation. However, he made a decision not to do anything about it, and God dealt with him in a very severe way. And number three, special treatment or misuse of individuals for the benefit of the leader. As I said, it could be someone's got a very powerful testimony, or they're really being used powerfully by God, but there's more emphasis on what the person can bring to the ministry and the benefits to the ministry as opposed to the person's well-being. And finally, please rest assured, if you have had the misfortune of being misused, abused, ill-treated, belittled, rejected or hurt in any way by a church leader, God is not happy about it. There is life after spiritual abuse, and God wants to restore the life of anyone who has suffered at the hands of such leaders. So that's it for this episode this week. Tune in again for another episode of When Church Hurts. But until next time, stay strong, keep the faith, and God bless.